Ben Reiter is with Sports Illustrated, senior writer, author of Astroball, The New Way to Win It All. And, of course, he predicted on the cover of Sports Illustrated the Astros would win the 2017 World Series 3 years before it happened. Big show off here. Who do you have winning this year, Ben?
I picked the Astros again.
Oh.
I'm doubling down. I did it actually stupidly on November 2nd. Everybody was like, look, dude, you can never make a prediction again. Like, you have to ride this one, ride it out. Well, the night before in my column for SI.com, I already predicted a repeat. I was kind of feeling myself a little bit.
But if I said you could do a redo?
I'm sticking with them.
Oh, okay.
Look at that pitching staff, man. I mean, I don't think people are quite realizing how that pitching staff's going to play in October when you can shorten it. I mean, it's historic.
Are they the best team in baseball, though? Are they just better equipped for October than anybody else?
I think they are the best team in baseball. Perhaps not right now with Altuve out and Correa out and Springer out. I mean, that hurts. But yeah, top to bottom, I think they are again. But look, man, playoffs, anything can happen. You can see wild card team getting through that short series. It's a crapshoot, really.
All right, but you also you talk about the new way to win it all. And is it a new way to win it all when you look at what the Florida Marlins did when they won a couple of World Series titles, where it felt like there was a 4 or 5 year window? Then you take the wrecking ball to it, dismantle, and then build it back up. Weren't the Marlins doing what the Astros and the Cubs did, but years ago?
To some level, but it goes far beyond the tanking, or as the Astros would say, not investing in a team that is not going to win right away, which is how they pose that question. It's really about how they made the decisions that they rebuilt the team. Like after they were bad, how do you build it back up? And the pendulum had swung very far towards Moneyball, towards analytics, towards running your team by computer. Ever since Moneyball came out in 2003, the Astros stroke of genius, as I dig into in the book, was bringing back in the human element, recognizing that humans are flawed, they're biased, but they can pick up things that computers can't, that algorithms can't, figuring out a way to synthesize them to guide their decision-making. That's the big idea in the book, anyway.
Wait, explain that.
Okay, well, look, like scouts had fallen out of favor. You remember in Moneyball, right? Brad Pitt sitting on one side of the table, the crusty old scouts are on the other side of the table going on and on about what the guy's girlfriend looks like and things like that. I mean, that's where we were, right? Like the primacy of Brad Pitt, obviously because he's Brad Pitt, over the scouts, the primacy of numbers over human gut instinct, human observation. The Astros said, look, like, yes, we're going to push analytics as far as we can go, but to get the real edge, we have to go back to the scouts, figure out how to use that information. So it's really combining new school and old school to move things forward.
I have a problem with Moneyball.
Let's hear it.
At no point in the movie do they mention they have one of the great young pitching staffs. So we give credit to Billy Beane, Brad Pitt, hey, Scott Hatteberg. At no point do they Bradford. Go, we got Huddy, you got Mulder in there, you got Zito in there. Who else was it? Isringhausen, I might have been in the bullpen. That's why Moneyball worked, because you had one of the best rotations, best young rotations that we've seen in decades.
And, of course, it ultimately didn't work. As Billy said, my stuff doesn't work in the playoffs, right?
Yes.
As he said. For the Astros, first of all, I mean, I do write about Correa and Altuve and Springer and Verlander in this book, but it also worked, right? I mean, they won. The idea is like how they developed those players, how they even drafted those players. Nobody expected them to draft Carlos Correa first overall in 2012 out of Puerto Rico, which hadn't produced a good player in a long time. If you went by numbers alone, you wouldn't have taken him based largely on the track record of Puerto Rican players. It was very bad. That was a scouting call, really. Like the numbers did support that, yeah, maybe there's something in this guy that we haven't seen recently from the island. But that was a real scouting call. They met Correa. They learned how when he was 8 years old, he asked his parents to send him to a bilingual school so that when he was a baseball star, he'd be able to give his interviews in English. Like that's the sort of drive that a computer can't pick up, but scouts can. And that's why the Astros kind of realized that there's value in the human element as well, and that numbers can't describe everything.
But did the Cubs apply Astroball? Were they doing the same kind of blueprint here?
Similar concepts. They didn't have to do it to such a depth, obviously, because they have some advantages being in Chicago. They had kind of a better system when they started. Jeff Luhnow had nothing really in the cupboard. I mean, yes, Springer was in the low minors, striking out a ton. Keuchel was maybe going to be like a number 5 command and control guy, possibly. Altuve, a nice slap-hitting middle infielder. Beyond that, they had nothing. In the major league level, they had the worst-ranked minor league organization, farm system, I should say. So yeah, I mean, this is why they had to do it to such a depth and with such a purity, and really pushing to the bleeding edge of innovation in baseball and sports.
Ben Reiter's book is Astroball, the senior writer for Sports Illustrated, who predicted the Astros would win the World Series 3 years before it happened. Also, you picked the Cubs to win the World Series, beating the Indians, and you said they'd do it in 5. So 2 games off, but still, you got it right.
That's not bad. People have been asking me to predict all sorts of things. Like they think I know stuff now, right? Like Powerball numbers, stock picks. One guy came up to me at an event. He was like, "Can you tell me when I'm going to have a child?" And I was like, "My understanding, dude, is that that's up to you." Like, I'm not sure. So again, I did pick the Astros to repeat, but I'm not sure I should be making too many other predictions immediately anyway.
Bryce Harper was not traded because why?
Because I think that the Nationals couldn't bring themselves to give up on, this is the 7th year of them being an elite team. They haven't made it past the league, the LDS once, right? I think when push came to shove, it's like, are we really going to just give up on this project that seemed like would produce multiple World Series champions, hasn't even produced an NLCS appearance? I don't think emotionally they could bring themselves to do it. I'm also not sure the return was there. Like, yes, he's Bryce Harper. He's also hitting about 220 with a wins above replacement of 0.5. So are you going to blow up like your last chance perhaps in this cycle for maybe not a great return for Bryce Harper? I get it. Maybe not something the Astros would have done if they're in the same situation, but I get it on an emotional level for the Nationals.
But if we look back on this, let's say Bryce Harper and Scott Boras go, you know what, we're going to go where the money takes us here, and we're not going to stay in Washington, D.C. Do you think Nationals fans will look back on this trade deadline decision and go, it's better that we rode this out instead of trade for him? Like, it almost feels like the Nationals know that this could happen and that they're sort of bracing for Bryce Harper not being there. So let's see what happens second half of the season. And you know what? If he leaves, we at least got 7 years out of him.
Yeah, I think that was the decision, really. And I can't blame them. I really can't. Like, when you've been building for so long, you do have, a $190 million team with multiple time Cy Young Award winner on it, Bryce Harper, Daniel Murphy. You've got the greatest phenom in baseball right now, Juan Soto. Like, yeah, I'd give it 2 more months. It's not like the Braves and Phillies have been great, but they don't have a track record. Who knows if they'll be able to carry it through? Part of baseball, part of sports is not numbers, it's not scouting, it's belief. And I think that's what it came down to in Washington.
The Dodgers at the trade deadline, you got Dozier, who I love that pickup for them. I thought that was a great, sneaky little pickup. Obviously, Machado gets the headlines, but where do the Dodgers now stand? Are they the team to beat in the National League?
Definitely. I mean, the fact that they had the most terrible first 2 months of the season you could possibly imagine for a team with that talent level. And coming into the deadline in a pretty tough division, we're already in first place, and then added the single best player available at the deadline and kind of the sneaky sleeper best player in Brian Dozier. I mean, you've now got, like a 70 home run middle infield, essentially, in Los Angeles, to go with that deep pitching staff. Yeah, I mean, the first 2 months are forgotten now. They're the favorite. Still got to like the Nationals. I do. The Cubs. But I mean, we could be looking at a rematch from last October, which really wouldn't be a bad thing.
No,
that was a pretty great World Series.
But if I had an open draft and you had to offer somebody a 5-year contract, so you got the first pick, open draft.
I mean, Mike Trout, right? Is not a trick question, is it?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Is it that easy?
I think it's definitely that easy, for sure. I mean, nobody's going to notice because the Angels have fallen off so far, but he's on his way to, again, one of the great seasons of all time. And again, a season in which he's not going to win a playoff game, not going to make the playoffs again. It's a problem for baseball, obviously.
Yeah.
People don't see him. He's playing late at night for most of the country. He's not playing in October. As Rob Manfred said, he doesn't have like a huge personality. But really, I mean, it's time to appreciate Mike Trout. We are seeing an absolute legend every single day right now.
But if I compare these numbers to prior players, Mike Trout's numbers are great today. But compared to the greats of yesterday, he's not on par with them.
Depends how you look at it.
He's not on par with Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle with what they did, or you throw in Ted Williams. Now, he's a better fielder, and he can run, but nobody's paying for stolen bases anymore.
Well, I was talking to JD Martinez the other day, actually, about why he did not get a bigger contract. Here he is, he's threatening for the Triple Crown.
Yeah, he's been incredible.
And he has like a 5-year, $110 million contract, which for me is a lot of money, but on baseball terms, that's nothing for
he's a
guy
bargain.
like that. And he said his understanding was that everybody does want to pay for the 5 tool guys now. He's like, I'm not a great fielder. I don't run. What I do is in the box. So I do think that baseball is actually has an understanding of the value of those other skills, speed, fielding, and that's what they're paying for now.
But the game is about I throw hard, you swing hard.
Yeah.
That's the game.
Right. I think the idea is there's a lot of people who can do that you can maybe get some differentiation with the guys who can track down a ball in the outfield, steal you a base. Like if everybody can hit for power, if everybody can throw strikeouts, where do you get an edge? Maybe it's in those athletic guys like Mike Trout.
But you also have, if I said the open draft and let's take Trout out of it, you got somebody for the next 5 years, who you take? You got to take my guy.
Judge?
No.
Who's your guy?
Mookie Betts.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
I love Mookie.
Yeah. We'll see. Another one, another 5-tool guy. So you're picking Mookie Betts is, yes, he hits for power. He hits
but
for
I
average.
grew up in an era with the 5-tool guy, and that I love watching that. But baseball fans don't. Nobody's bunting. Nobody's hitting to the opposite side of the infield. Move a runner over. That's my biggest problem with baseball is there's no movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's treated as a strange event when somebody like bunts against the ship.
Like, Dad, what's that? That's a bunt, son. But could somebody go like the Royals did or the Cardinals did back in the 80s, where you did a completely different, your approach was different?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of what the Royals did to win a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what the Giants did as well. That was kind of in vogue for a while, speed and defense and station to station. It's passe now, but baseball runs in cycles. Maybe we'll see that come back. When everybody's doing the same thing is when you do something different. That's essentially what the Astros did, right? Like that's how they built themselves into what they are now. Now you have 8 or 10 teams trying to do exactly what the Astros did. There's no advantage in that anymore. Like it's hard. There's only one number 1 overall pick. So if everybody's tanking, gunning for that, they're not going to get it. They're not all going to be able to rebuild themselves as the Astros did. You're going to have to try to figure out a new way forward.
Give me the sneaky team that shouldn't win the World Series but could win the World Series.
This year?
No, in 5 years, Ben. That's what you do. Give me your prediction in 5 years.
Well, I mean, if it's not the Nationals, I don't know how sneaky it is, but the Indians, I think, right? I mean, nobody's talking about them underneath the 3 superpowers in the AL.
Why is that?
Because
they're in Cleveland?
Yeah, they're in Cleveland. Like the Yankees and Red Sox are the Yankees and Red Sox. The Astros are now the Astros after last year. Cleveland kind of started off slow. But when you look at this team, they're as dangerous as anybody. I wouldn't have said that perhaps before they traded for Brad Hand. That was the perfect trade, the perfect deadline move. This team needed a dominant reliever because Andrew Miller is not healthy. He's not what he was a couple years ago. And they got the best one on the market, and they traded their best prospect for it. Like, that's the platonic ideal of a deadline trade. But you look at this team, I mean, they've got absolute superstars, even if you don't think of them as such. Francisco Lindor, Jose Ramirez, I mean, legitimate MVP candidate, somebody who was essentially a utility infielder a couple years ago. I mean, terrific team. I can assure you that nobody wants to face them in October.
But why don't we can talk about Mike Trout, that your superstar doesn't really, he's not a national superstar. You got these kids in Cleveland, and there's no promotional value attached to them at all.
Right.
Mookie Betts gets it because he plays with the Red Sox. If Mookie Betts played for Pittsburgh, we might look at him the way we did Andrew McCutchen. Like, he's a really talented player. Wonder where he's going to be next year.
Right.
When they can't afford him here. But, that's part of the problem, too, with baseball. You do have these markets. The Yankees are always going to promote. But, it's the whole league that it feels like they don't know how to promote these players. They don't know how to promote teams. And it feels like we focus in on the same teams and the same players.
I still think a few years later, they're battling a bit of a Jeter hangover, right? Like Jeter carried so much water for them as far as being the face of the league, as far as being the superstar for so long that underneath him, there was less motivation to kind of develop the next wave. And now he retires, and they've been struggling with it for several years now. How
do you think Jeter's going to do in that job in Florida? Is he long for the
my
long haul?
My magic 8 ball is a little hazy on that one. Look, I'm actually impressed. I thought it's gone better so far than I thought it would. I thought this team was going to be an absolute disaster, but I mean, he was talking a lot about these intangible things that I write about in the book.
So now they're
actually
just a disaster. They're not an absolute disaster.
They're not. I don't even know if they're a disaster. Like they're kind of rebuilding.
But they're not interesting.
They're not interesting. That's true. But he was talking a lot about these intangibles like drive and like all these clubhouse things that a lot of people were scoffing at.
Remember when he got upset with Bryant Gumbel, where Bryant talked about them tanking and Jeter got upset about it. He goes, no, those guys play hard. It's front office tanking. You take the big names out, you trade them away. Of course, you put kids on the field and they're playing hard, but you are tanking. It just comes from the management and the product you put on the field, not how hard you're playing on the field.
Yeah, I mean, they do seem to have some sort of spirit in that clubhouse that's allowing them to play better than the sum of their parts, which is not something they had for, 8 years before that. I did a story on Giancarlo Stanton when he came to the Yankees, and he was telling me, I just wanted stability. It was 8 different managers, 8 different hitting coaches. We had to wear suits on the road. We couldn't wear suits on the road. We could have facial hair. We couldn't have facial hair all the way through. We think, oh, that stuff's silly. It doesn't matter. I think that cultural stuff really does matter. That's something that the Astros certainly understood, in part why they brought on Carlos Beltran last year. And I think that's something that Jeter does understand, perhaps on an intuitive level that a lot of stats people might not.
The book is Astroball, and the writer is Ben Reiter, Sports Illustrated senior writer, The New Way to Win It All. We appreciate you joining us, Ben. Good luck with the book. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.